Board of Directors meeting for November 17th. We will start with a roll call of attendees here in person and virtual.
Yes, Davidson.
Here.
Donovan.
Here.
Fleetwood.
Here.
Hawkinson.
Here.
Huffman.
Here.
Cortez.
Here.
Lautenbach.
Here.
Lilyquist.
Here.
Darwin.
Present.
And Executive Sadhu is absent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We now will go to our first item, which is a public hearing on the draft 2023 budget. Ms. Shipman, do you have a brief presentation?
I do. Josh is going to help me pull that up. Okay, great. So here today, we're to talk about the draft 2023 proposed budget. This was sent out in your packet and it kind of augments the discussion that we had in October. So we're pulling some elements of that over. The desired outcomes that we're looking for today is a shared agreement on the 2023 priorities, a shared understanding of the budget outcomes. Oh, Josh, have the next slide. And potential approval of the 2023 proposed budget. We do have a resolution in the packet for your consideration. Just to review the 2023 high priorities that we've resourced out to the budget, they support our mission. Also is improving safety on the buses and at the stations, investing in our people, advancing innovative ideas, maintaining a state of good repair, and planning for the future. These aren't all of them, but they are the top ones that we've identified in the mission, in the budget. And then our intent and results for the budget is we've developed the budget that resources to these priorities and the mission. And then some of the results we're looking for is the implementation of WTA 2040, working with our funding partners to increase equity and service to the overburdened communities, and continuing to show the value of WTA to our community. Just to review the 2023 proposing positions, there are 7 of them. 4 of them are to stand up the new safety division under Jeff Benson to address some of the issues that we're having both on our property and on our buses. So there's drug use, graffiti, vandalism, and really to help our passengers and our operators have an enhanced sense of safety on the buses. We've got a procurement specialist that will augment the division that Megan is in, and that will help support the capital intensive programs that we'll talk about in a bit. And then 2 administrative positions to support payroll and benefits. Currently, we have 1 person doing payroll and 1 person doing benefits. And so we're looking to create a wing and a team that will support all of these for WTA. And we worked with HR on developing a hiring plan to bring these positions on throughout the year. They're not all budgeted for the entire year, but as they come onto the system. These are some of the proposed operating initiatives, and we've talked a number about these before. I won't talk a lot about number 1, as Tim has a public hearing on that later, but looking at increasing our paratransit service to Blaine and Birch Bay. And this was a way that we looked at service that was necessary and wanting to augment the system without rolling out the regular 2% system-wide that we have done in the past, but really trying to focus on where is service needed and where can we have a greater impact. We have a number of studies that we're conducting to assess the service and some choices that we can make. With the success of the Linden Hub, we're going to look at additional micro-transit opportunities, see what other communities that might work in, or if there's other options for first and last mile transportation. Conducting an economic impact study, and this will be both measuring the direct results that WTA has in the community, jobs created, trips that we've provided, and also the indirect aspects that we have. And then looking at evaluating our performance measures to determine our service demand. So in the past, we've had the quadrant where we've had the 4 boxes where we look at service, and with the different focus on efficiency, equity, and the environment, thinking, are there different ways that we need to assess service demands? And Tim and Becky, if there's anything I'm saying that you guys want to jump in on, please go ahead. Next is the proposed capital assumptions, or excuse me, initiatives. A lot of these we've talked about, and many of them are carryovers from last year. So installing the AC on the fixed route buses, that was a request from our team members that we're working on putting in place. Replacing vehicles, continuing to install the charging facilities to support the electric buses we have coming. An exciting one is the Transit Access Fund. So that was new and funded in 2022. We've received 2 applications that I believe are through the approval process or working their way through. And this fund allows smaller jurisdictions to apply for funds to address gaps in the transportation network. For example, providing a sidewalk to a transit stop between a school or putting a shelter out in place. So that's really exciting.
And that's a board topic for next month.
Thank you.
Okay, maybe I'll let the cat out of the bag early.
No,
Continuing to improve our stops and shelters. And then another large one that we talked about that could be potentially really transformative is researching transit-oriented development and working with partners on those types of programs. And then a new one is designing and constructing a building on the Midway lot. And this is one of the first dominoes that we will pull to be able to move the route maintenance folks out of the bay and start a transition with Moab to support our future needs. Right, and then the budget assumptions, these are a few of them. And these will be, if the board approves the budget, these assumptions will become included in the budget. So these will be the things that you'll be agreeing to. We've budgeted sales tax at 2% above the projected receipts for 2022. We're expecting 2022 to come in at about 11% above budget. So with this 2%, we're looking at about a 13% increase year over year. 2% sounds conservative, so we want to build in some room for the uncertainty, but we haven't seen really any great decline in sales tax receipts. And we've had actually about 5 months continually of $3 million.
trying to look forward when you're looking at what's happening with Amazon and some of these retailers, Target's reports recently, behaviors are changing some, and so we wanted to be conservative. 2% with the 11% of this year, 2% over that still is a large increase, but more conservative than in the past.
Thank you. Eric, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, Shonda, what's the typical projection and actuals been over the last, say, 5 years for sales tax?
I would say, Eric, our typical assumption in the budget has usually been between 3 to 5%. So this is the 2% is the lowest projection that we have done probably in the past 8 years. We typically come in, I would say, maybe 5 to 7% above budget. 2021, we were below budget, but I would have to do a little research to get you those specific numbers. But
Oh, that's a good starting point. Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. Fair revenue, we budgeted below the 2022 budget, and a lot of that is that we're not back up to the 2019 ridership. Plus, with the Youth Ride Free program we rolled out, it's changed the ridership demographics there, and we also changed the way that we bill Western and Whatcom. We used to bill on an FTE count, and now we're billing on a TAP count. So there are a few things that went into projecting that out lower. Wage considerations in the budget, there's a 2% COLA effective in January for non-represented employees. And we're currently negotiating with the ATU. So we will expect to come back when that contract is settled for a budget amendment to address what those contract considerations are.
So to be clear, that's not yet built into the budget.
Correct.
Thank you.
Benefits, we're seeing increases in medical, 4.5% to 7%. Medical continues to increase every year, but these are smaller than we expected. Also, some of the employer contribution rates are up. And the one I failed to put on here is fuel. Our fuel budget is almost double what it was in 2022. So we went from about 1.2 million to almost 2.3 million. Right, and then we'll translate all of this into numbers with the draft income statement. And I'll just try to pull up the things that we just talked about. You can see fair revenue overall is fixed route revenue is the one I was talking about. That's really below budget. The other ones we're seeing some small increases. And there's our sales tax income pushing $39 million. No more COVID relief funds. We will have drawn down by the end of the year, the last of that federal package. And then the operating grants are increased, and primarily that is due to the transit support grants with the Move Ahead Washington. There's about $2.8 million in there. that WTA was eligible for by implementing the youth ride free for up to 18, well, up to 19, and agreeing to not decrease our sales tax rate. So not supplementing sales tax with these grants. So you see the revenue is a bit lower than what we anticipated in 22. It is more in line with what we normally budget. And then expenses, a little increase in wages and salaries, that will be the line item we'll bring back. Employee benefits, and really everything else is up. The outside services is up over our 2022 budget, primarily due to those studies that we're doing with contracts. And then we also have 2 contracted employees that we're planning on, a contract specialist and a grant specialist that we want to bring on in 2023 as a trial to see, what does our workflow look like? Can we keep a grant specialist occupied the full year? So that might turn into something we want to bring in-house. Supplies and materials, fuel, insurance is up. That's due to some of the natural disasters that we've had over the past few years. So the market is a hard market, plus with the changes in insured values with WTA. And then education and general expense. We are trying to get folks out to travel and to get to conferences and increase their education again. And travel is just really expensive. On the capital side, you see a large increase in capital expenditures. That's on the next, oops, that's okay. Now, a lot of those are carryover projects from 2022, but we'll look at that in detail. And then the grants and contributions are the ones that we have secured at this point in time. If we have more grants coming in and then additional projects, we can fund those. We'll bring those back to the board. And I apologize, the last line you can't see on that is we're looking at a net loss of about $7.1 million. We roughly equate that to use of cash. It's not a one-to-one. But again, that is if everything on this income statement happens in 2023, which never happens. The next slide is just a graphical interpretation of this for those that like the pictures. The top right is operating revenues. You can see sales tax is 85.8% of the income coming in, and grants is the next one at 9.1%. And then contrasting with the graph on the left is operating expenses between wages and benefits and supplies. Those percentages are greater than our sales tax income. So the story is we tend to bring in less revenue than we need to cover most of our discretionary expenses. And that's something that we continue to monitor and look at ways that we can either increase revenue or control our expenditures moving forward. Next slide. This is the capital projects and grant revenue list. You can see the first 3 line items are buses that we're expecting to receive in 2023. And then the next 2 are some capital projects on facility designs that we've talked about. And then there's just a handful of things that have pulled over from 2022. And then some things that we need to start taking care of to improve our facilities, keep them in a state of good repair. And then as we go down to the bottom of the list, there's really some things that we just need to take care of. Okay, next slide. And this is also just a graphical representation of the capital projects and the grant revenue. And really what I want to point out here is that the WTA local funds are supporting about 56.5% of these capital expenditures. So we do receive grants frequently that cover between 15 and 20%, excuse me, 80 to 85%. But with some of the type of projects we have budgeted that are not grant eligible, we're picking up more of that expenditure. And then the last slide is what our 5-year cash flow and projected reserve balances look like. And you can see as the years go out from 2023 to 2027, we're expecting to spend down both our cash and our reserve accounts. The blue is what we call undesignated cash, and I'll equate that to your daily checking account that you use to run your daily operations in your house. And then the reserve accounts are similar to savings accounts. So if you want a savings account for a deck, savings account for a vacation, what we do here is plan out for 7 years and then try to fund each year appropriately. So when the expenses due, we have that money sitting aside in our savings account. We think this meets the goal of what the board had talked to us about, is spending down cash, spending down our reserves. And of course, we evaluate this every year take a look at what the outcome will be if we continue to spend as we do. Do we need to make some modifications? And this is based on the approved 6-year CIP, which we approved back, I think, in May, April. And it does not include the zero emission fleet transition costs. So once that plan comes into the board and is approved, we can shake it up and revise this to take a look at what those expenditures might look like and what our cash balances.
Todd, do you have a question right now?
Yeah, on the operating reserves, do we have a policy of like what percentage of our revenues or expenditures we want to keep the operating
We do.
reserve?
That policy is actually from the state auditor, and it's a minimum of 60 days. of
60
your
days, okay.
Operated budgeting, your budgeted operating expense.
So those red bars are well within 60 days.
And our target's 90 days, but our minimum is 60.
Our minimum.
Yeah, but we target 90.
60 or 90-day reserve could actually carry us for a year if we had a 15 to 25% revenue drop. I think that's the way I like to think about it, that we wouldn't have no revenue, but if we had a severe drop, we could drain on that 3-month amount for up to a year. Todd, is that enough for you right now?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thanks.
And the other two reserve accounts are also set by policy, by board policy, which we reviewed back, I believe it was in 2019. So we'll bring that forward, I think, in 2023, just to assess whether that's in line with what the board wants to do and what it looks like with some of our future plans.
So one reason that greeny section there is smaller is that we actually changed the reserve policy to not require ourselves to hold as much.
That is correct. So 23 and 24 are heavy in green because of the bus deliveries that we have that are on hold. As we move forward, we did have the policy of holding 2 years of the entire expenditure, and now we change it to 2 years of what the local requirements.
Right. So that drop in green was a policy decision
Correct.
we made. So the last 3 years is intentionally at the right level, or
Correct. Based on what we know right now, as we assess the needs for fleet expansion and replacement, that could fluctuate year over year.
Eric, do you have a question or comment? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, thank you. Shonda, thanks again, as always. Just amazing work that you do on the budget. I'm so impressed with you. In the proposed new positions, I have a couple of quick questions. First about the administrative positions. We're doubling the size of the administrative positions, which is this something that they've been running on 130% for a long time, or are we just in need of this many more positions? Because the first thing that I think of when it comes to supporting payroll is, instead of paying somebody, with benefits and wages $100,000 a year going forward, we invest in new technology. And that's probably not a question for Shonda. That's probably a question for somebody else. And then on the safety positions, can we delve a little deeper into what that's going to cover? I mean, I feel like from past discussions, we need more safety folks, but I'd just like to take a few minutes to talk about that, because that's potentially $500,000 a year, and I want to make sure we're getting the right kind of bang for our buck, so to speak.
Sure. I'll start with the administrative, and if you can help me with that, and then Les, if you want to talk about safety. So Eric, we have been running really with one procurement person for the past 8 years that I've been here. That's Megan. And there are some things that we push out to the departments to help us with. There's a little bit of decentralization, but the more complex competitive solicitations and the overall oversight of that is sitting with Megan. So we're looking to support that. So we have really one single point of failure in procurement if something happens to Megan. And she is planning on leaving WTA in June of 2024. So we're trying to set up a succession plan and bolster that area. And then with the two administrative.
Before we jump off that, if I could, just from a strategic standpoint, when you're looking at the reserves and so forth, is we've been talking about last year, or this year and next year of being a lot of studies to set the foundation for us to move into more construction and more initiatives happening. So, for example, as we move into the 24 to 27 timeframe, we will have a significant amount of capital construction going on, which is very heavy on the procurement side, as everybody who's done public works knows, from the bidding aspects, the retainage, the statements of prevailing wage, all those kinds of requirements that go into it. And with one person doing that, we're just not aligned to be able to execute a large capital program, which is what we're driving towards, particularly if, with BTS and those kinds of things being there, we need that. So I just wanted to add that, how that fits into the overall strategy of what we're trying to do.
Megan just reminded me also with the grants that we're getting a number of different type of grants with different requirements. Procurement works really closely with Aaron in finance and the grants team on looking at what those requirements are. A lot of them can be very different, so that just takes a big chunk of time also.
And there was another question, those are HR related.
Sure, want to take that one?
Sure.
Okay.
So the other positions in payroll, so we've had one position for payroll for 20 plus years. And in that time, our agency has tripled in size. So we are doing things to restructure to not add, the true size of staff that might actually fit our organizational size, but just at the beginning of November, we moved payroll under the Human Resources Department to align some of that work, and then bring in one person to oversee the system. And I appreciate the comment on technology. Actually, that's some of our most important work, is to make the technology we have work for our HRIS, our Human Resources Information System, really work for us. We have a lot of untapped capacity in that system because the folks who work in it aren't able to do any, higher level or productive work in managing improvements in the system. It's very much scrape by, got to get payroll out every couple weeks. And so we're really actually looking to invest in the systems we already have. And the vision here is to bring in a manager to oversee that system, oversee the payroll side of it, actually have a backup, that we have a single point of failure in payroll as well, which is a huge risk for the organization. And then on the other payroll associated position is actually not within the Human Resources Department. It's a timekeeper to support the operators and operations department. And there's a lot of detailed work that goes in every week really, to make sure our time is kept appropriately. We have new leave laws that are complex and challenging to piece together, and that position is intended to make sure that the information that's coming into the system is good and that there's less chasing things down later. So it's really just to bring us up to a level that we probably should have been at several years ago, and to use the systems that we have to a better degree.
And this brings us up, and best practices are on SHRM and those on what you should have per employee.
So
David, adequately address your questions.
well, so it sounds like the benefits and payroll person you're bringing in will be for benefits and payroll, and then that'll free the current people up to do some other higher level stuff. And you talked about software to help HR be more efficient. Where in the budget is that software addressed? And is it a 1-year project or a several-year project?
It's our current software. We use a program called Vista through a company called PDS. I don't know what PDS stands for. I'm not sure they've ever shared that with me. But anyway, we do have a current HRIS system, a Human Resources Information System, and there's a team of employees, including folks in the IT department, that work to use and improve this system. It's not built for transit, and we have to connect it with the transit system that does timekeeping for a lot of our employees, and there's a strong connection between it. So there's a lot of detailed technical work that needs to happen to improve the system. And the folks who are kind of frontline managing the day-to-day employee data coming in don't have as much capacity for system improvements to make that really work well for us. And so the idea here is to bring in a manager to oversee that, do some of that, create capacity for that organizational work, provide a backup for payroll, and then of course support the whole technical system and the system of folks who support our employees. So did that answer it, Eric? Do you want to say something, Josh?
I also mentioned in the budget is, I think about $80,000 in capital and operating to bring in a document management system tool into the whole agency. And that will have some opportunities within finance and HR to improve workflows and especially improve across departmental exchange of documents. So we're not having to track down the paper, implement some workflows, digital signatures, things like that.
Hey, Josh, can you go ahead and stop screen sharing? That was the last slide. Sorry to interrupt you, but you're talking to the camera. No one was seeing you.
And then just a quick couple of minutes about safety would be fantastic as well. Just kind of what that's going to entail.
Yeah, so there's 4 people that would be employed for safety purposes, and what they would be doing are eyes and ears out in the field, ride check, so that we're best deploying them. Jeff Benson has been going through a year's worth of operator notes, reports, those things to look and see where things are and where incidences are occurring. We know from operators coming back that there are proclivities for certain incidences to happen at certain locations. And so these safety and security or safety folks would be out to support our operators so that things are getting increasingly complicated for operators as they are trying to deal with things on the bus like drug use. There's behavioral things on the bus. They're trying to operate the bus and then trying to figure out also where to send people resources and things of that nature. These people would help with that, which the desired outcome of that is that then there's a better feeling of safety from our passengers and customers and users, but then also from our operators, that they have a resource that is increased. This is a problem that's not just at here in WTA, but it's across. You look up and down the Puget Sound and then across the nation, and most agencies are implementing something like this, from King County to Community to Everett to Link Transit over on the east side. And so that's the hope. We tried a security outfit this year. Our philosophy is always to see if we can do something without incurring ongoing employment expenses. That didn't work. It just wasn't, they weren't able to get out of the field, and trying to get them to have the right WTA philosophy was difficult. So that ended, and we realized the problem's still there. We need to address it, and this was the best way we could do it. The 4 people were designed based on looking at incidents around and how do you get people for our operating hours, 7 days a week, so that we can have coverage throughout that time. Hopefully that answers.
Any idea what we were paying for that similar type of security last year in the past per year?
Yeah, it was about $80,000 in the security.
Okay, so this is going to be $400,000 to $500,000. I don't know what you're going to pay a security guard, but with benefits and everything, we're looking at $400,000 to $500,000. That's 5 to 6.5 times what we were paying. And I'm not for security. I just want to make sure that it's going to the right spots and that we're keeping a good idea of what we're actually getting, right? Because I work outside of Blaine City Council. I work in social services, and there are plenty of great projects out there, and some of them are just they're just a funnel for money, and some of them are very efficient and run really, really well. So I hope that what we're doing, this $500,000 of taxpayer money that we're spending, is hitting where it needs to hit, and I hope that we can take that information and also reach out to the other municipalities, the other law enforcement agencies, maybe even some of the social services units, and have some good communication on not just solving the problem right now today, but like in the long term, how do we work on this? Is this a PD problem? Is this a mental health problem? Is this a whatever kind of problem? Because otherwise I feel like we could we could throw $500,000 at this every year until it gets worse, and then we throw 700,000 at it every year, and then on and on and on. So that's just my worry, especially going from 80,000 to 500,000.
And this is one element of that approach. Others are discussions with the homeless outreach team through the Opportunity Council to do. So there's multiple layers, lines of effort to that, which include making customers feel safe, making operators, giving them resources to be able to handle things, looking at how do we get connecting people to those services when they need it. How do we outreach with law enforcement at a time when they are under-resourced to be able to respond? A lot of our incidences occur in Bellingham, and it's tough to get them to respond to the level of things, the drug use, the graffiti, those kinds of things. They're tracking it, but it's difficult on them when they're stretched. And so there's these various lines of effort that we're trying to do, and this is one piece of that to try to help in addition to partnerships.
Let me maybe put it this way to address Eric's question. Do you and Jeff have some ideas of what performance measures or outcomes you'll be looking for in the next year with the new program? So, I mean, to Eric's point, is it going to do its job? How much have you thought about what a good job would look like?
So yeah, the answer is yes. And so it's looking at incidences of graffiti, instances of things like at the restrooms downtown. It's looking at the damage to those things. It's how many people are breaking our glass at our areas that our fleet or our facilities folks, our road maintenance crews are out fixing on a daily basis. So it's a number of those to see if we can make a difference with those driving down. And quite honestly, I don't know whether it will or won't, but we know having a presence out there does help to some degree, and it's targeted presence. So it's not riding the whole county, it's going to those locations that we've seen through data shows where those incidences are and the timing of those. And then that's where we'll have emphasis patrols out doing that. And then we'll monitor to see how it goes. We couldn't, the security wouldn't work, and they didn't go out in the field and wouldn't do that work. So trying something.
So this is a new budget initiative. Is there any more budget discussion from Shonda?
No, I would just summarize that I think we put forth a budget that resources to the mission and our priorities, and it's ready for approval.
And there was coverage on the budget in the Cascadia Daily. How did you feel that coverage portrayed things?
I thought it was factual.
We'll call that good.
Maureen's our PIO. I'll let her send more of that. From the numbers perspective, it was factual.
Mm-hmm.
I would think maybe the security safety issue was maybe not handled reported exactly how we perceive what the need is.
Right, because this is a budget hearing, and so this sort of has to do with how the public perceives the budget, not just how the board perceives the budget.
And we received no public comment.
Okay, so let's take it to the hearing then. We've received no public comment. I'm going to go ahead and start the public hearing if there are no more questions from board members. Are there any members here from the public virtually? If so, you can unmute and raise your hand or somehow be recognized. Jameen.
Hi, yeah, thanks for allowing us to comment. I just wanted to comment on the security issue as someone who's lived in a lot of big cities around the United States and used public transit around the country. Security seems to be the big black hole that regional transit agencies can pour unlimited money into. And it has been, a sticky issue for a lot of localities. And I would really, really like to see WTA prioritize transit service over pouring a lot of money into security services, especially when 4 people are only going to have a very limited impact, and the ability of those 4 people to have a meaningful effect on the public's perception of safety is probably going to be very, very limited if they're able to do that at all, right? And as we know, like public perception of safety, especially on on transit is something that's really hard to control and has to do with a lot of macro factors that WTA, even with half of its budget in safety, might not be able to address. So that's all I wanted to say. I love WTA. I've been riding it since 2008, and really want to see more frequency and better services, especially in Bellingham where I live. But that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Shameen. And also I see a hand raised by Leanne Keel.
Hi, I don't know, is this the time when I'd want to talk about the changes out to Birch Bay and Blaine?
Actually, that's the next action item where we're talking about the actual bus service
Okay,
changes.
well-
So
Okay, well, wait, my son Josh is here. He's disabled and he wanted to talk too, but he's got to leave at 9:15. So just to let you know.
we'll try to get to it probably within the next 4 or 5 minutes. Would that work
Okay.
for you?
Yep, great, thank you.
Okay, stand by, thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to address the issue of the budget? Okay, if not, I'm gonna go ahead and close the public hearing. Later in the meeting, we will actually consider the board to vote on whether or not to approve that budget. Are we ready to move on, board members? Okay, so we're going to the next item, which is the one, Leanne, that you were interested in, which is now a public hearing on Route 75 proposed changes in service. Tim, do you have some words on that?
Yes, yeah, we'll give a briefing to the board this morning as follow-up to our October 13th presentation that Becky gave to the board. So the proposal on the table is to make adjustments to the Birch Bay Blaine area service, which includes removal of the flex service. It includes some minor routing changes to the Route 75, which is the service that goes to Blaine and Birch Bay. And with that change, we would be adding Birch Bay Village, which is the major source of the flex ridership. When we look at the numbers, the vast majority are actually trying to go to the Birch Bay Village. And then also to add a deviation to the food bank, which is also a significant destination. And then with those changes, we're also proposing to add paratransit service, which in our estimation is the greatest demand up there in terms of providing for new ridership. So we have presented to you that proposal with the cost of approximately $220,000 for the first year, and it's $450 or so for future years. So it's not an inexpensive investment, but we feel that it's justified given the ridership that we assume will grow in that area. And then I would say that we've received 10 written and verbal comments, and that does not also include the 2 public meetings we held in October. So we had some additional comments that we received, and those are included in your packet as well. Most are all are in favor of paratransit service. We had a few comments that were concerned about removal of the flex service. Some people are using that flex service. I would also say that one of the big challenge for this particular area is just the nature of the low density of the area, the infrastructure challenges in this area too. So it becomes a big challenge for what kind of service is appropriate for that area. And we found that fixed route with the flex was not working very well. The challenge there was we had difficulties staying on schedule. And so if we had one trip, for example, to Birch Bay Village, the whole trip then got off time, and so it was delayed for other people on that route. So removing the flex, it's a difficult decision, but I think that's the best decision overall for passengers. And picking up those who are disabled or in need with the paratransit service helps to address some of those gaps. So long term, this is probably the first step of future service changes we might make in this area. I felt this was critical to address now and not wait. But in the future, we'll be looking at the possibility of on-demand and other changes for this area as well. So with that, I'll just turn it over for.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and hurry and open up the public hearing to hear from Josh and Leanne. If there's no objection to that, I'm going to go ahead and begin the public hearing. Would you like to speak? If so, go ahead.
Okay, here we are. We live at Birch Bay Village. And Josh has a job out in Linden 2 days a week, and he has a job in Bellingham 2 days a week. And we've lived out here for 14 years. So right now, he's doing probably 8 flexes a week. So two a day down here to pick him up at our lower gate. And then he does paratransit part of the way, just because, you know, there's no bus that goes directly out to Linden. So he does paratransit part of the time.
Right.
And I wrote a letter that Josh's jobs, he works 6 hours a week, but he's either waiting for the bus or on the bus for 28 hours. So it would improve his life a great deal to be able to have the flex and also the paratransit out here for both his jobs. And I think the ridership out here will increase. I've tried to encourage on our next door neighbor app that, you know, kids that maybe need to go to a football game or something, you know, it's relatively safe out here. And, you know, it'd be a great thing to have that regular bus service. So would like to really encourage that. Josh?
Yeah, I've been living out here for 14 years, like my mom said. It would be a better thing for me, at least for me, too. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So to be clear, would paratransit service work for Josh's needs?
Yes, he has to take a flex from down here, and then he gets dropped off at the McDonald's in Ferndale. And part of the reason for that is because of the safety issues with the Ferndale station being unstaffed. You know, it's dark in the mornings, in the winter time, it's dark when he's coming home. So he gets dropped at the McDonald's, and he usually goes in and gets a drink or something just so that he can hang out in there when it's cold and wet, waiting for paratransit that then takes him out to his job in Linden. And then he gets a paratransit from Linden's Homestead Fitness to the downtown station, where then he takes the flex from there to come back out to Birch Bay Village. So, and then same situation goes when he has his job at Fitness Evolution on Iowa. There's no sidewalks and there's no bus route that goes directly down Iowa Street. So he takes the bus, the flex from here to the downtown station, gets a paratransit from downtown over to Iowa, and then has his job, and then takes a paratransit from Iowa back to the downtown station, where he waits for an hour and a half or so before he can catch the flex back out to here, which that puts him home at 5:30, which it's dark. So, yeah.
So again, I want to make sure I'm understanding Josh's situation. Right now, he uses both the flex and the paratransit, and he puts it together, but it takes a long time. With these changes, would it work for Josh using just paratransit, and would it maybe actually save him some time?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
But I'd also think the fixed route would be great as well, just because Josh would probably use that more, you know, as far as being able to navigate it himself, to go maybe into town to go work out at his gym and meet up with his girlfriend at Barnes and Noble, you know, something like that. So both.
Okay,
both
so
will help him.
it sounds like a fixed route might even be a better solution, but that's currently not on the table.
So just to clarify for the board, we do not
Well-
have a regular route that goes to Birch Bay Village. So you have to arrange a trip, you have to call in for a trip on the flex service, and you have to do that. You have to actively do that. And so this change
Yeah.
would allow us now to go to Birch Bay Village on every single trip. And then it also, in addition, because it's now a regular route and we're adding paratransit, that he'd be able to use if he qualifies for paratransit. So he has both options now, regular service as well as paratransit.
Okay, thank you, Leanne. Is there anybody else in public who would like to speak
Thank
to these
you.
proposed service changes? Okay, seeing no other members of the public here, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back here for board discussion. Tim, there's a couple other comments, written comments in the packet. Do you think that you've looked at them? Were there any changes made, or do you think there's any, what is your reaction to those?
Yes, we had one specific comment we had was to expand our route further south towards to the state park. We looked at that. We felt that any additional routing changes would then upset our schedule. We felt that we couldn't do that without significantly rearranging the schedule. So we had a couple comments like that we looked at very closely. I don't know, Becky, if you want to address that.
Yeah,
further.
just looking at that and the density and the additional time it would take with the route is already fairly circuitous to get to Bellingham, that we didn't think it was appropriate at this time for this level of change. But we looked at all the comments and felt comfortable with the proposal as is.
Thank you. Board members, any further discussion? Are we looking for, are you looking for a decision from the board today?
We would accept the decision of the board.
If we don't decide, you'll just have to come back and ask us again.
Not it's on for December.
Okay, board members, any further discussion or desire to make a motion?
I'd like to just make one statement. I think at this point, removing the flex service is not in the best interest of the public. I think there are many people that have used it for decades, using the flex part of it. I appreciate adding the paratransit service. I think that's going to help out a lot of folks as well. And adding the stop at Birch Bay Village may alleviate some of the flex is that happen out there, and that might help some of the time. But I think that the flex service needs to stay. There are people that have used it for decades. They depend on it, and we're leaving them high and dry at this point if we remove it. I heard you say that we might be looking at adding a hop type service there, and I think at that time then it would be appropriate to remove the flex service, because then those people then have options. So that's my comment on it.
If we did another hop service, where are we thinking it might serve?
Yeah, so very preliminarily, we haven't looked at this area, but we have to set the specific boundaries. The challenge there is it's a very large area, right, to serve. So we anticipate it's going to be very expensive, but this is probably an area that could deserve that type of service, given its low densities, given the difficulty of taking large buses on smaller streets. We suspect that it would cover most of the Birch Bay area and also Blaine. But again, we'd have to take a look at that and model that ridership, and then discuss whether or not we need to adjust the fixed route service. Because potentially what we'd want to do then is use the microtransit service to get onto a regular fixed route service on say I-5 to get you into town very efficiently. So we have to look at and model all those factors, and it's going to be a few years before we get to that point.
A few years.
Given the need to purchase vehicles, get operators, to budget for it.
Thank you for your comments, Stan. Any other board members? Go ahead, Jen.
I'm just wondering, do we know how many people that currently use the flex service, pretty reliably will be unable to use service if we remove the flex, if they're not eligible for paratransit?
I don't have the number of those that are not eligible for ADA paratransit. Seems like we might be able to see who's currently riding and who's eligible. I'd have to check with the paratransit department.
Do you have rough ideas of how many are using the flex service currently?
Yeah, so the average flexes ranges, I have it by day a week, it ranges from 9 to 13 flexes a day for the weekdays, and then 3 on Saturdays. For Birch Bay Village, 6, a little over 6 per day. So about half of those would be taken care of by the extension to Birch Bay Village. And then I'm not sure of the rest, how many of those would be able to get to the nearest stop or would be eligible for ADA. So the people that would be disaffected would be who would not be able to get to the nearest stop, and then those who are not ADA eligible. So we'd have to look into those numbers to see if we can get that.
Yeah, quite a few now are close enough to the fixed route service, they would not need to flex. They just order flex even though they're close to the route. So a lot of those, and then again, half or a little over half are going to Birch Bay Village. So it's a relatively small number each day that is not.
Well, and I think for the time being, it would be nice to keep that flex open, even if it's for a 6-month trial period, to see what those numbers are once we have both in place. And if it becomes a matter of the flex is virtually gone, then we can get rid of it. So
What is the cost to maintain flex, and also in terms of the personnel needed? If we kept everything, what would that mean?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the issue that we're trying to solve is that right now the extreme variability in the number of flexes that are scheduled per trip. And so a lot of the time, one flex is scheduled, the bus can stay on time, it has the allotted time. We don't have a limit on the number of flexes. So if there's 4 flexes on one trip, then that's 10 to 15 minutes late to the Bellingham station. And then those that are riding miss their transfers, are late to work. The main issue that we're trying to solve is just the vast unreliability of the route with the flex service and the large area that we cover in the flex. Like in Kendall or in Tumas, it's not as much area that we're covering in the flex. The flexes are more consolidated to less time taking to get to each flex. So we would, in order to solve, we would have to figure out how we would solve the reliability problem of the number of flexes. So we would have to limit the number of flexes per trip, potentially add time to the route so that we would be budgeting for the max number of flexes, which may only happen once or twice a week on a few trips. So then we're spending money and having people sit on the bus while it's just waiting because no flexes have been booked. So right now, the bus will just need to lay over for 10 minutes at a point if no flexes are. So if we add to the flex, then the bus could be laying over for 15 minutes if nobody's booked and just waiting. So that's the issue that we're.
And I'd say this is a significant source of complaints to the WTA. We get regular complaints about delays, primarily due to those flex trips. So it's almost a weekly occurrence that we get these complaints, and it's a challenge, right? Because then we're disaffecting people who are trying to ride. There's the delay; they have to wait. They may be waiting for the bus, and it's not arriving because it's on a flex trip. So it's a difficult issue for us to address. And adding time is again a delay getting into your ultimate destination as well. So
go ahead, Eric.
So can I ask, is this issue with the flex, is this just for specific areas, or is it a problem with flex as a system? Like,
I would say it's that for this route, the flex area is covering so much too big of an area that creates too much variability in how people are booking and what number of trips are being booked, that the range of the schedule is so big that it makes it really hard to be predictable for those that are riding regularly.
So it's
with other
not
flex routes, this is not so much of an issue.
Correct. It's a smaller geographic area and the flexes are more clumped together. There's not as many offshoots to this direction or that direction. It's a smaller, sort of more contained area that the deviation is not creating as much of a variability in the schedule.
So is the answer maybe not getting rid of flex altogether, but is the answer possibly the client, the customer has to be more flexible if they need a flex because they need to get to a 10 o'clock appointment and they want a 9:15 bus. They don't necessarily get a 9:15 bus. They may have to get the 8:15 because the 9:15 is full, and they're going to have some flexibility on their end. Is that a potential,
Right.
Well, I think the issue is that one riders will influence other riders' experience. If you have a day where there's 3 or 4 flex requests, the one regular person, for example, now has a very different day when there's like 3 other passengers to pick up than when there's only 1 other passenger to pick up. And that is that sort of the unpredictability that riders are facing?
So they're often missing their transfers downtown if we book too many flexes on a trip. So we're just trying to do too much. And if we add more time and then those 4 people don't book, then you're just sitting mid-route for 15 minutes.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is if an allotted route only has time for 2 flexes on it, for example, and somebody calls for a 3rd flex, maybe they just don't get the time they want. Maybe they have to go later in the day or earlier in the day. I mean, because we're not magicians here. We can't just magically move somebody from point A to point B. I mean, could that be a fix that, like, not only are we flexible, but they're flexible?
Yeah, I think that's something we could look into. That's a common solution for this kind of service for other agencies. They limit the number of trips, whether it's 1 or 2 a trip. We'd have to take a look at what I think we could accommodate through that and see if the software enables us to limit that number. But that's a if the board wants to entertain that proposal, we could look into that further.
Yeah, and I think we would have to add running time to the route, because if we go every trip to Birch Bay Village, that uses up a majority of the flex time, and some of the other flexes added to that would cause the bus to be late. If we're now going to Birch Bay Village every trip, I think we would need to add some running time, which would be some cost and would cause a domino effect to the schedule with how it is now. We'd have to look at how we could.
Yeah, I'm not just talking in this route. If this is a problem on half a dozen routes because of the geographic area, then maybe we need to look at how we do flex.
Right.
Well, can I follow up with that, Peggy? You say what sets this route apart as a problem is this large geographic area. So if you have 2 flex people and they're a distance from each other, that's a problem. Is there a possibility of adjusting the flex route? So cutting out service to some areas, but finding where flex is most often used so it functions more like the other flex routes. Has that been discussed?
Yeah, we've looked at that a little bit, but that wasn't our primary way to solve this. But we could look at keeping we would have to then also have paratransit where we don't have flex. But we could look at having a smaller area that we would flex to. That would be the areas that we thought were most disaffected by the removal of flex.
So board members, we're still looking for a motion. As I understand it, this proposal has 3 portions: adding paratransit service, extending the routing from Birch Bay Village and C Street in Blaine, and then also removing flex service. Presumably all 3 of those kind of go hand in hand. How does the board feel about the proposal? Don't be shy.
I would move to accept the proposal as proposed for Route 75.
I'll second, and then I have a thing.
Okay, we have a motion on the table, which is to, as I understand it, accept all 3 aspects of this, which is to add the paratransit service, to extend the route, but also to remove flex service. Go ahead, Allie.
I'm just wondering that, in the coming weeks or months, if we could put together some information about paratransit service and hand it out to people before the change is made, just so they can apply before flex goes away.
Yes. Yes, there is time to do that.
When would these changes take effect?
In June of 2023.
Michael, can I make another motion on top of this motion?
That's appropriate.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that Route 75 proposed service changes with the add of paratransit, with the extending the route of Birch Bay Village, but to remove the part that says remove flex service. With that being said, I'd like to look at it again in 3 months or 6 months and then maybe remove it then. So That last part was not part of the motion, so.
Is there a second for the motion? I'll go ahead and second the amendment. So as I understand it now, we have an amendment on the board. The amendment is to approve 2 of the changes, but to not approve the removal of flex service. And Eric, I agree with you. It would be very appropriate, I think, for us to come back and revisit that because there was good reasons for staff recommending it. And I think it deserves further discussion. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to the amendment? Okay, I'm going to call the question on the amendment. So the amendment is to modify the main motion, remove the removal of the flex service. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye, and hopefully I can see everyone's hands or something. I'm not sure how to do this. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, I see a majority voting aye. So now we have the main motion, which is now amended and only includes those 2 portions. Is there any
All
further
three in 1
discussion?
second.
I'm sorry, Seth, what?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't muted. I'm at, you don't need to know my situation. Ignore that, Michael.
It's ignored. I didn't hear a thing.
Good.
Can I ask the administration how workable the amended motion is?
What we'd like to propose is to come back with a new proposal as far as how we serve flex given the board's direction. So with considering whether or not we limit the number of trips, look at the area served so we can, and then adjusting the schedule. So we'd like to bring that back to the board so we come up with a workable
Yeah, I think we
solution
would
to
look at
service.
reducing what is the appropriate, either reducing the flex boundary with the extensions to the routing and the addition of ADA service, and then looking at the limiting of the flex trips, and then whether we need to add time to the schedule with keeping.
Okay, Becky, thank you. That sounds like a good idea. So the motion before us is to approve now the changes in June, which would be adding paratransit service and extending Route 75 to Birch Bay Village and C Street, with the understanding that the administration will bring back a discussion of the flex component. Please raise your hand in some way if you can. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I think I saw a majority. Was anyone want to vote no? Okay, so that motion passed unanimously. Thank you very much for that discussion. We look forward to hearing back about the flex service in the future, which will currently remain in effect until we decide otherwise.
Do we, just for a point of order, do we need to do anything with that first motion? Do we need to?
No, your
No?
amendment modified that first motion.
Okay,
That so the main motion was modified by your amendment, and then we just passed the main motion. So it's all good.
Vicki, do you have that for the record?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for checking on that. We're out of time, but let's keep going because we still haven't approved a budget. Are there any citizen communications? Any member of the public here, or did we receive any communications we don't know about?
We received that.
Okay, we'll keep moving on. Board action. First item is potential consideration of approval of the 2023 budget, which we just had a public hearing on. Is there any desire to make a motion on this, to
Move
delay
to
it?
approve the 2023 budget.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion on board. Ally seconded the motion, Todd's motion. Is there any further discussion? This is to improve in its entirety the 2023 budget as presented. Hearing none, we'll vote on the budget. All those in favor of approving the budget, please raise your hand or signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any opposed? Raise your hand or signify by saying no. Okay, the motion passes. The budget is approved for 2023. Thank you, Ms. Shipman.
Thank you.
Routine business, consideration of approval of minutes for October.
Move to approve the minutes.
Vicki, did you get a second on that? I couldn't hear.
No, I didn't get the second.
second.
Okay, somebody
I
seconded. Vicki,
Yes,
you can
got it.
figure it
Thank you.
out.
Yes.
All those in favor of approving the minutes, raise your hand or signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Minutes are approved. General Manager's report.
Just one thing, we have one meeting in December on December 8th. That's it.
Okay. When are we going to be considering possible changes in the board schedule? So right now we have,
That's next.
okay, we have back-to-back meetings because we used to have this executive committee and board. Now we have 2 board meetings. The question before us is just want to spread them out so they're every 2 weeks roughly rather than back-to-back. And we'll decide that in December
December 8th.
for all of next year.
Yes, looking at the calendar, staff's recommendation will be 1st and 3rd, just because of work holidays and things fall. But 2nd and 4th works.
Board members, keep that in mind. We'll decide next month. Any further business for the WTA Board of Directors? Thank you, everyone. Good meeting. This meeting is adjourned.